You're listening beside the Colosseum, in Rome, at the sarcophagus fountain. The fountain, road rumble and passing murmur are my recording. Tonight is one part of Marcus Aurelius's life. You don't have to do anything. I'll do the sitting. Come along, drifters. Tell me where you're drifting off from tonight, or where in the Maritimes we should walk next. I read every one. And if you'd like to find your way back here, follow the show. Think of it as leaving a lamp lit in the window for yourself. That's the whole favour. Now, no more asks. The rest of this hour belongs entirely to you. By my bed, a nose strip, dark glasses, magnesium with the last glass of water. The list is written under this episode right at the top. Not promises, just what I use. Let the bed take your weight. Hands loose, legs done. The stone is holding me, and the bed is holding you. If my voice becomes another sound in the fountain, that's the idea. Working. Marcus was taught not to join the racing factions. Later, Rome mocked his paperwork at the games. That's our life tonight. Everyone in it has been at rest for 18 centuries. Nothing can go wrong anymore. But first, the reason you might be awake. Somebody else's day came home with you. It may have arrived through a meeting, a family room, a crowded train, a message thread, or one voice speaking as though volume were evidence. You did not choose the mood, but you carried it. Now the room is quiet and the crowd is not. A sentence keeps returning in somebody else's tone. An argument you did not start is still borrowing your jaw. A worry that belonged to the office has taken off its shoes and settled at the foot of the bed. The body has left the gathering has not yet left the body. Crowds do this without being wicked. Most of them are not even aware they are doing it. A room finds a pace, and every nervous system in it begins keeping time. One person hurries, another answers faster, a third decides that calm must mean indifference, and before long, everybody is running toward a door nobody intended to open. The same thing happens with applause, indignation, fear, and certainty. We borrow them from one another because human beings are social animals, and social animals are excellent at sharing weather. Then night comes, and the borrowed weather is still in the house. You are tired. The thunder is not even yours. That is a poor arrangement, though a very common one. The building around this recording was made for that sharing. More than 50,000 people could watch together, react together, and send one feeling around the tiers faster than any messenger could run. Marcus lived in the 2nd century, when the Colosseum was already working. Rome had several places for public spectacle, and the clearest surviving scene in tonight's story happened at the circus across the city. That is no hardship. Rome did not keep all its shouting in one building. To understand the emperor in the stands, we have to begin with the boy before the stands belonged to him, while somebody was still trying to teach him how not to be carried away. Marcus was born into a family close enough to power that power noticed him early. Before he was old enough to want the empire, the Emperor Hadrian had begun arranging a path toward it. Tutors came, duties came, ceremonies came, with clothing that had to be worn correctly and words that had to be remembered in the right order. One of his teachers gave him a smaller lesson, and Marcus kept it for the rest of his life. Do not become a partisan of the Greens or the Blues at the races. Do not take the side of one shield style or another at the gladiatorial fights. In plain words, go if duty takes you there, but do not hand your judgment to the colour everybody beside you is wearing. The Greens and Blues were not mild sporting preferences. They were loyalties, neighbourhoods, friendships, grudges, and sometimes street trouble, all tied to chariots running around a track. A child could inherit a faction before he had an opinion about horses. A senator could make himself popular by cheering correctly. An emperor could learn a great deal about the city by noticing which colour made it roar. Marcus's teacher did not tell him never to attend. That would have been easy advice and useless preparation for a ruler. He taught him not to become green inside or blue inside simply because the people around him had decided that one colour contained virtue and the other had ruined Rome. Rome was always being ruined by somebody's team. The boy was not naturally gloomy. He boxed, wrestled, ran, played ball well, hunted, and could be talked into a theatre or a spectacle when friends pressed him. Then philosophy took more of him. He became serious, though he kept a certain geniality. I am glad of that. A philosopher without geniality is only a rule book that has learned to clear its throat. Marcus studied until his health suffered, then studied around the suffering. He learned law as well as ethics, because the future being prepared for him would require more than private goodness. It would require petitions, accounts, appointments, grain, roads, punishments, and crowds who expected a ruler to look pleased while providing all of it. When Hadrian died, Marcus was still a young public official. His adoptive father left Rome to bring the emperor's remains home, and Marcus stayed behind to manage the funeral duties. Among those duties was a gladiatorial spectacle, presented in his own name as a private citizen. So before he inherited the imperial box, he learned the practical side of the games. There were contracts, performers, animals, officials, seating, timing, prizes, security, and a public that did not consider any of those arrangements its problem. The crowd arrived at the appointed hour and expected wonder. Somebody else had been awake over the lists. That is true of nearly every effortless public pleasure. The ease in the seats is built from work behind a door. Years passed. Marcus was adopted into the imperial family, married Faustina, sat beside Antoninus Pius, and learned the state by doing its ordinary business. He watched a ruler who could enjoy public splendor without mistaking it for the point. Marcus later praised Antoninus for spending carefully on spectacles and buildings, for looking to what ought to be done rather than to the reputation a man might buy by doing it. That lesson mattered. Games were not only entertainment, they were politics, employment, religions, public generosity, and the visible promise that Rome was still Rome. A philosopher could dislike the appetite and still owe the city an afternoon. Stoicism did not remove Marcus from the crowd. It gave him a harder question. What does duty require while the crowd is making its own demands? By then, Marcus was emperor, and the games had become part of his work. An emperor in the stands was not merely another man watching. He was part of the spectacle. The crowd watched the field, and it watched him watch the field. Did he lean forward? Did he smile? Did he favor one side? Did he look generous, bored, frightened, amused? A private citizen can stare at the floor when the room grows loud. An emperor's face was public property, or so Rome believed. Marcus attended because attendance was part of the office. But presence did not mean surrender. While the contests went on, he kept another part of the empire in his lap. It was Marcus's custom at the circus games to read, listen, and sign documents. Petitions came up, reports were heard. Decisions received his name while the crowd was watching something else. And the people openly mocked him for it. They had come for a performance and found their emperor doing correspondence. Rome could forgive cruelty more readily than inattention. Inattention made the audience wonder whether it was still the center of the world. He did not leave. He did not order the mockers removed. He did not throw the tablets aside and manufacture delight for them. He sat where duty put him and kept working. The crowd supplied the noise. It did not get the pen. There is a temptation to make that scene too clean. The philosopher above the noise, the crowd below it, wisdom calmly signing its name. Human beings are seldom arranged so helpfully. Marcus may have been genuinely indifferent to the contest. He may also have been making a public point about his industry. A man who keeps paperwork visible in a stadium may know that it is visible. Still, the papers were real work. Somewhere outside the stadium, a tax case, a military appointment, a town's request, or one person's legal trouble waited on the hand holding that pen. The lesson does not require him to be pure. It only requires the next action to remain his, while thousands of people try to choose it for him. In the private notebooks we now call the meditation, the amphitheatre appears without romance. Marcus writes that the same sights, seen over and over, become wearisome. Above, below, the same things from the same things. How long? That is not a speech to the public. It is a tired man writing to himself. The contests repeat, the applause repeats, the emperor's own annoyance repeats too. He had not reached some permanent calm beyond irritation. He kept discovering the irritation and answering it again. That is more useful to us than a marble saint. A man who never feels the crowd has nothing to teach a person lying awake with it. Marcus felt it. Then he tried not to let the feeling write the next line. He had another method for spectacle. Take the thing apart. A song is one sound after another. A dance is one movement after another. A contest is bodies changing position under rules. The mind is dazzled by the whole arrangement, so he returned it to its pieces, not to become cold, to see what was actually there before admiration or disgust recruited him. Crowds work by presenting a whole mood at once. Everyone is delighted, everyone is furious, everyone knows what must happen next. Break the mood into pieces, and it becomes voices, faces, hands, a few repeated sentences, and your own body answering them. Much of the spell leaves when the parts are allowed to be ordinary. Marcus did not always resist the spell well. No one does. He could be severe. He could brood over other people's faults while writing reminders not to. He could dislike public appetite and still provide extravagant public scenes. One account says he once presented 100 lions together and had them all killed with arrows. We can leave the detail plain. It does not improve because a philosopher ordered it. The same man could write that what harms the hive harms the bee, then govern an empire whose pleasure depended on suffering he did not abolish. He lived inside the moral limits of his century, and sometimes reinforced them. Stoicism made him more deliberate. It did not make him ours. Then the northern wars grew worse. Armies were needed along the Danube. Disease had thinned the legions and the treasury was running down. Marcus recruited wherever Rome could find bodies. Slaves were armed. Bandits were turned into soldiers. Gladiators were taken into service as well. The arena had trained them to fight, and the frontier now needed fighters more than Rome needed an afternoon's entertainment. This was an external decision with a public cost. The games lost performers. The city noticed. People began saying Marcus intended to deprive them of their amusements and drive them all to the study of philosophy. It is one of history's better complaints. Rome could endure a war. Compulsory philosophy was another matter. The joke tells us more than the praise does. The people knew what sort of emperor they had. Serious, economical, forever consulting somebody, capable of looking at a gladiator and seeing a recruitment problem. They also knew how to sting him. Philosophy was not being offered as a compliment. It meant dreary restraint imposed by a man who had forgotten what ordinary people liked. Marcus did not answer by closing the venues. He left instructions that wealthy sponsors must keep providing amusements while he was away. The shows were to continue. He would not let the crowd decide the war. He would not pretend the crowd had no claim on the city either. A ruler has to live among appetites he does not share, and govern people who are not failed versions of himself. This is where the scene becomes more difficult and better. The easy Stoic story would have Marcus reject the games, scold Rome, and go north with a clean conscience. He did none of that. He took trained men because the army needed them. He required rich Romans to fund replacement spectacles because public life needed continuity. He delayed some theatre performances so business would not be interrupted. None of these decisions satisfied a pure principle. They were adjustments made inside a crowded world. The crowd did not vanish when he refused to obey it. It remained a part of his duty. Stoic independence was not leaving society. It was keeping enough of his own judgment to serve society without becoming its echo. The war needed money too, and the ordinary solution was another tax on people who had no seat at the imperial table. Marcus refused that solution. Instead, he opened the palace cupboards. Gold cups came out, crystal, royal flagons, statues, paintings, Faustina's embroidered robes, jewels inherited from Hadrian, kept in a cabinet old enough to have acquired the dignity of never being opened. All of it went to the Forum of Trajan for public sale. The auction lasted 2 months. Rome watched the emperor's household become lots on a list. A palace is very impressive until somebody puts a number beside the curtains. Then it is furniture, and the frontier is still waiting. The sale brought in enough to continue the war. Later, Marcus told the buyers they could return what they had purchased and receive their money back. Some did. Some kept the imperial cups, which I think was reasonable. A cup has already survived the humiliation of an auction. It may as well get a new table. The point was not poverty performed for applause. The point was sequence. A public necessity came first. The household adjusted. That order is hard to keep when a crowd is present, because crowds make whatever is visible feel most important. The games were visible. The palace was visible. The quiet burden on provincial families was not. Marcus tried, unevenly but repeatedly, to let the unseen claim govern the seen decision. When the first long stretch of war ended, Marcus returned to Rome and celebrated a triumph with his son Commodus beside him. There were games, gifts, ceremonies, and the usual effort to convince a tired empire that victory had arrived whole. Soon afterward, Marcus placed a limit on the expense of gladiatorial shows. He had not abolished them. He had not converted the city. He had put a boundary around what they could consume. That is less dramatic than a ban, and probably more difficult to administer. Every sponsor believes his spectacle is the necessary exception. Every crowd thinks restraint should begin after the event it has already planned to enjoy. Marcus did what he often did. He wrote rule and handed it to imperfect people. It would be pleasant to end there, with moderation written into law and the philosopher returning north. But a life is not an argument arranged for our comfort. Marcus kept providing games. The city kept wanting more. He could limit expense and still accept the institution. He could dislike the spectacle and still use it. He could hear mockery without punishing it, then grow severe in other rooms. The discipline was never a clean escape from contradiction. It was the repeated work of choosing inside it. That matters tonight. You do not need to become untouched by other people's moods before you can stop obeying them. If you wait to feel nothing, the crowd will keep the keys. The useful moment comes earlier, while the noise is still present and the hand is still yours. Marcus's own line was not that impressions never arrive. They arrive first. A cheer reaches the body. An insult reaches it. Fear reaches it. The face warms, the jaw sets, the heart answers before the mind has finished asking what happened. Then comes the smaller space in which assent is given or withheld. Not a vast inner fortress. Sometimes only half a breath between the shout and the reply. At the games, Marcus used that space for a document. At war, he used it to move trained fighters where he believed they were needed. In Rome, he used it to place a limit on the cost of the spectacle. None of those acts ended the noise. Each one kept the next movement from being selected by it. And yet the hardest crowd in Marcus's life was not made of strangers. It came into his own household, through the person he most needed to reach and could not. The public games were one of the places where that failure became visible. The father learned to sit among applause without giving it his whole mind. The son learned to want the applause for himself. The father remembered a teacher telling him not to become green or blue. The son would one day wear the green uniform in private and build his days around horses, contests, and being seen. A philosophy can be offered across a table. It cannot be installed in another person's character. Marcus knew this in theory. His family made him know it in the expensive way. There is one person we have to bring into this life now. Commodus was Marcus's son, born while Marcus was already emperor. He grew up inside a household where every childhood preference had servants, teachers, flatterers, and political consequences. Marcus took him north, gave him honors early, placed him in a triumphal chariot, and eventually made him co-emperor. These were acts of affection, policy, anxiety, and inheritance mixed together. Rome did not have a safe way to raise an emperor's son. It barely had a safe way to stand near one. The people around Commodus learned that pleasing the boy might become a profession. A crowd can begin with 50,000 voices. It can also begin with 3 adults agreeing that a child is never wrong. By the final years of the Northern War, Marcus had begun to fear what kind of ruler his son might become. Near the end, he grieved at the thought of leaving Commodus behind. Still, Marcus left him the empire. There were political reasons. There was no obvious substitute who would not bring civil war. There was also a father, and fathers have been known to find one more hopeful interpretation when the harsher one is standing in the doorway. Marcus could look at a public crowd and separate noise from duty. With Commodus, the two were harder to separate. Love can make a very fine philosopher search the same evidence for a kinder answer. When Marcus died, Commodus was 19. He abandoned the unfinished northern campaign, made terms, and hurried back toward the comforts of Rome. Soon the duties of rule passed to other men, while the young emperor gave himself to horses, hunting, and spectacle. The difference between father and son could almost be drawn with one object. Marcus carried documents into the games. Commodus carried the games into the government. Money, offices, schedules, punishments, and public attention bent around what pleased him. The arena was no longer a duty he endured for the city. It became the room where the city was required to adore him. A crowd that could not choose Marcus's pen learned that it could feed Commodus's hunger. And the hunger learned to call itself rule. Commodus entered the arena in costumes heavy with silk, purple, gold, and gems. He fought with opponents arranged so the emperor would win. Senators and knights were required to attend. They were told what to shout. One elderly senator, Claudius Pompeianus, stayed away and sent his sons instead. He preferred the danger of refusing to the shame of watching Marcus's son turn imperial office into a performance. That refusal is a small, hard thing inside a very large building. It did not stop the games. It did not remove Commodus. It kept one old man's mouth from lending honesty to the applause. Sometimes that is the whole available duty. Not victory, not silence. One voice declining to say what power has written for it. The senators who did attend had reasons too. They had families, houses, dependents, and a ruler who could turn displeasure into an order. They shouted the required praise. Some hid laughter because laughter itself had become dangerous. I do not think Marcus would have judged all of them cowards. He had spent a lifetime trying to govern human beings as they were, not as a philosopher could arrange them on a page. The crowd inside that later amphitheatre was not free. Some were excited, some were afraid, some were calculating how visible their enthusiasm needed to be. A roar can contain many different hearts. That is worth remembering when a room seems unanimous. Volume tells you what a crowd is doing. It does not tell you why every person in it is doing it. Marcus's failure with Commodus does not cancel the life. It completes the difficult part of it. He could discipline his own attention and still misjudge another person. He could restrain public expense and still pass the whole public world to a son unready for it. He knew no one could manufacture the people he wished to govern. He did not fully accept that the same limit stood inside his house. A father can provide teachers, examples, offices, warnings, journeys, and every advantage a palace can hold. He cannot provide the final assent. That belongs to the child when the child is no longer a child. Marcus had an empire's reach and met the ordinary boundary every parent meets. Another mind remained another mind. So this part of Marcus's life ends without a tidy verdict. The public mocked him for working at the games, and he kept working. The city accused him of stealing its gladiators, and he kept the army supplied while ordering the shows to continue. He sold palace goods before raising an extraordinary tax. He limited the cost of spectacles, yet never left spectacle behind. He taught himself not to become a faction, then handed Rome to a son who wanted the arena's praise. Some of that is admirable, some of it is failure. All of it belongs to the same man. A life becomes useful when we stop polishing it long enough to see where the hands actually were, and what they chose while the crowd was speaking. Now bring the story back to the room you are in. The crowd that followed you home is probably smaller than Rome's, though it may not feel smaller at this hour. A colleague's hurry, a relative's certainty, a stranger's anger, a whole screen of people reacting at once. The body receives the impression honestly. It speeds up, it prepares an answer. You do not have to scold it for being social. You only have to stop treating the first borrowed rhythm as a command. Marcus did not make the circus quiet before he signed the paper. The quiet was not the condition. The choice happened inside the noise. That is why the old scene still has something to offer a bed in a different century. Take the mood apart, the way Marcus took a spectacle apart. There was a voice, there was a sentence, there was your body answering. There was a thought about what the sentence meant. Then there was another thought, arriving in the first one's uniform and pretending to be an order. Those are pieces, not one solid thing. You may find that one piece belongs to you. Perhaps an apology is due. Perhaps a task really must be done in the morning. Keep that piece. The rest can return to the people who brought it. Their speed, their volume, their appetite for immediate agreement. You do not have to call them wrong. You do not have to bring them under the blanket either. A crowd may lend you its pulse. It does not get to choose what your hands do next. That is the one line I want to leave standing tonight. Not because Marcus always managed it, because he had to manage it repeatedly, in public, with mixed results. The pen in the stands, the gladiators sent north, the palace cups placed on a table for sale, the limit written into the cost of the shows, the son he could advise and could not complete. Each scene ends at the same boundary. Other people can cheer, mock, demand, persuade, frighten, and disappoint. They can make an impression. The next honest act still needs a hand, and for your small portion of the world, that hand is yours. Tonight, the next act may be very small. Put the phone face down. Leave the answer unsent. Write one plain word for morning, if the task is real, and let the rest remain unwritten. No grand independence is required. Marcus had an empire, and usually needed a tablet. You have a nightstand, which is enough territory for now. The crowd will survive without a final ruling from your bed. It has survived emperors, factions, wars, and more than one person certain that the city would collapse if everyone did not react immediately. Rome is still outside. The room is allowed to become smaller than Rome. Around this recording, the present-day visitors keep moving. A footstep passes close, then joins the larger passage. One voice rises and is gathered back into the murmur. Nobody stays at the center for long. That is what a crowd becomes when you stop following its separate instructions. Not an enemy, not a teacher. A human weather moving through old arches. Marcus's Rome has gone. The Greens and Blues have changed names many times. The desire to join them has not changed much at all. But for tonight, You can hear the whole thing without choosing a side. Stone, steps, voices, distance. The building holds the crowd. You do not have to. That is enough of the telling. The documents are signed. The auction tables are cleared. The gladiators have gone north, the limit has been written, and the son has stepped into the arena that his father never learned how to remove from him. Nothing more has to be decided here. Everyone in the life has been at rest for 18 centuries. The crowd cannot reach them now. From here it is only the fountain beside the Colosseum, a room growing darker, and a voice becoming less important. You do not have to follow anymore. We are going to put out the lights. So we will close the house of this day, one light at a time. A day is a public building. Doors open early. Rooms fill. Every little matter hangs up its notice and behaves as though the whole place was constructed for it. By evening, even the corridors are tired. We will not throw anyone out. We will simply stop keeping the rooms lit for them. Start at the entrance with the feet. They carried you through the noise and brought you home. Let the light go out there. Feet warm, heavy, off duty. The building can stand without them until morning. The legs next, the calves, the knees, the long muscles of the thighs. Every step taken because somebody else was in a hurry. Every moment of standing when you would rather have sat. Put out those lights. Not with force. A hand over a small switch, and then nothing more required. Let the legs become part of the dark under the blanket. The hips settle. The low back spreads into the bed. No crowd needs carrying from here. No tier needs climbing. The arches can hold themselves. The legs have reached the private part of the night where nobody watches how well they rest. Now the middle rooms, the belly first, where a borrowed urgency likes to set up its office. Out. Let the office close. The papers can remain exactly where they are. Morning has clerks. The chest and ribs next. They have answered every raised voice with a little more work, all day without complaint. Let their light go low. They will keep breathing in the dark. The back can give up its walls. The bed is underneath it. The whole structure can lean now. Nothing important is being held up by tension. What matters will still be there after sleep has had its turn. The hands now. Marcus kept his around a pen while the crowd laughed. Yours do not need to keep anything tonight. Let the fingers uncurl. Let the palms go quiet. Put out the light in each hand, and then in the wrists, the forearms, the elbows, and the shoulders. The shoulders have been the upper gallery of the day, carrying whatever could find a stair. They can close. Dark along the arms, dark across the shoulders. The work that truly belongs to you has not been abandoned. It has been given a time. This is not that time. This is the hour when even a good hand lies open. The jaw, all the replies prepared there. All the explanations rehearsed for people who are not in the room. Put those lights out. Let the teeth come apart. Let the tongue rest low. The mouth does not need to win a case while the rest of you sleeps. The cheeks soften. The small muscles around the eyes give up their watch. The forehead goes smooth, not because every question has been answered, but because no question is being heard tonight. The crowd may keep talking somewhere beyond the walls. Inside, the last public room is closing. The house is closed. The hand is open. Morning can find the switch when morning finally comes. The crowd may pass. The stone may keep it. The papers are down. The hands are open. Nothing more is asked. No green. No blue. No answer tonight. One low light. Then rest. The crowd may pass. The stone may keep it. The papers are down. The hands are open. Nothing more is asked. no green, no blue. No answer tonight. One low light. Then rest. Good night, Drifter. Sleep well inside the old Roman murmur. The crowd can find its own way home. The room is smaller now. The lights are low, and your hands have nothing left to sign. You may rest.